His disdainful smirk cut through the silence. But I was no longer the woman I used to be. A black card, a white lie. My name is Sandra Holmes. I am 40 years old and I have no kids from my second marriage. My husband is a kind man who never misses our monthly dates, no matter how busy he is. He always keeps his promises. I know I shouldn't compare him to my first husband, but I have never regretted my divorce, nor have I regretted getting remarried. This month is our 8th wedding anniversary. My husband had reserved a table at a fancy restaurant with a view of the sea. I thought we were going to have a wonderful time, but then I ran into the last person I wanted to see. Jim Stone, my ex-husband from 10 years ago. We were about to leave the restaurant after finishing our meal when my husband excused himself to go to the restroom. I was admiring the ocean view from the window. What a beautiful view, I thought as I gazed at the sea. I reminisced about the times my husband and I had spent looking at the ocean together. Then I heard someone call my name. When I turned around, there he was. Hey, what's so beautiful? Do you think a regular ocean appears nice to someone like you who's pretty much broke? Jim asked. Jim, hey, long time no see. Why are you here? I replied, why, I'm the one who should be asking you why, he said, sitting down in the chair my husband had been using, looking at me as if I was a joke. Yes, those eyes. I put up with those eyes for a whole decade of our marriage. I never thought I'd run into you here. Can someone like you who doesn't have much money really eat at a fancy place like this? Can you even afford it, or are you here for a once-in-a-lifetime thing? It's our wedding anniversary, he sneered. Ah, I see. Poor people can only come to places like this on anniversaries, huh? He continued. I come here often, you know. You're still pathetic. Isn't there someone with you? Yeah, there is. I just sent her to pay. You know, handling money is a woman's job, he said. I thought he was still the same, always belittling women. He's back. Just wait there. The woman who came back was his lover from 10 years ago. She had aged quite a bit. Her beauty was half what it used to be, and she looked worn out from life. I guess Jim had been living it up while his wife suffered. You're still wearing shabby clothes, aren't you? Aren't you embarrassed to dress so poorly? He sneered. Talking to such a terrible man made me feel sick. I turned my gaze toward the restroom, hoping my husband would return soon. And there he was. He had been watching us for a while. Seeing the confusion on my face, he approached us. Excuse me, do you need something from my wife? He asked. Your wife? This woman is your wife? Jim asked incredulously. Yes. What do you need? You also look poor. I guess poor women always remarry poor men, Jim sneered. Please don't be rude. My husband is a very respectable man, I said. Jim snorted in disapproval at my response. Humph, you must be just a useless, broke man, he said, glaring at my husband. I thought this man really hasn't changed at all. Jim was very selfish. He worked for a major corporation. It was unclear if he was competent. He was good at sucking up to his boss, though. He blamed his mistakes on his juniors and loudly claimed their achievements were due to his guidance. How he managed to climb the corporate ladder is beyond me, but by the time we divorced, he had become a manager. Jim claimed he was an elite employee, but I never thought of him as elite. I graduated from a prestigious university, Jim bragged, as he always did. That's what Jim would always brag about. Not just any university, but a very different kind from the ordinary ones. When I was only dating him, I believed his exaggerated stories and thought he was really smart. But when we got married, I discovered that was his only real talent. Plus, he consistently degraded me even though I only completed high school. Your parents were too poor to send you to university, right? But it's good for you. You didn't have the brains for it anyway. If your family had been rich, you would have had to go to university, but it would have been impossible for someone as stupid as you. He said, my family wasn't poor. I just wanted to start working sooner rather than going to college, I retorted. Enough with the excuses. You can't handle not making excuses, right? You're an incompetent woman after all. It's good for women, isn't it? Even if they're incompetent or stupid, as long as they have good looks, they can get by. If they catch a competent man, they can live well, he sneered. I never imagined he would say such things before we married, so his transformation after marriage shocked me. Moreover, his parents weren't wealthy landowners. His father was just a director, yet he ruthlessly looked down on anyone he considered poor. You really can't do anything right. You're bad at cooking, you can't clean, and you can't even have kids. Marrying you was a huge mistake, he said. It wasn't a physical issue that prevented me from having kids. It was the stress caused by Jim. My family has always valued frugality and cherishing what we have, but when I cooked with radish leaves to save money, he yelled, "Are you trying to feed me trash?" and threw them in the trash. It made me realize how different we fundamentally were. One day he told me he had a lover, a woman much younger than he was. He pushed for a divorce, saying it was better for him to remarry a younger woman. I was happy to divorce such a man. I signed the divorce papers. "Who is this man, Sandra?" my current husband asked. "He's my ex-husband, Jim Stone," I replied. "Oh, I see," he said. Of course, I had told my husband about everything Jim had said and done to me. It had been a painful 10 years, and I had shared it all with tears. Then, without saying anything, my husband just listened and finally said, "Let's be happy from now on. You really dared to marry such a woman like her. Since you're marrying a woman from a poor family, you must be a broke guy too." "Well, maybe not," Jim said to my husband. "Of course you are, so you're also a broke man, huh? What? Marrying a poor person means you're broke too, am I right? But why did you divorce such a wonderful person?" "Wonderful? Your eyes must be fooling you. Truly wonderful means having a beautiful wife like mine," my husband said, indicating his wife as he pointed at her, who stood there looking embarrassed. "Is that woman your wife?" Jim asked. "Yes. She's beautiful, isn't she? She's actually my boss's daughter." "Marrying the boss's daughter definitely helps one climb the career ladder faster," my husband replied. "Marrying a broke woman like you probably means you're just a regular employee too." "Bad, a regular employee? I haven't heard that word in years. What are you trying to prove? Bottom-tier guy marrying a bottom-tier woman. It just means you'll both be broke for the rest of your lives. And you think you deserve to eat in such a fancy restaurant like this." Jim continued. "Well, this level of restaurant isn't a problem for us," my husband said. "Yeah, sure, if that's what you think," Jim scoffed. Just then a waiter passed by and my husband pulled out a black card, instructing him to settle the bill. Jim, surprised by the black card, tried not to show it but snorted again. "Is that a black card? Showing off a card like that here? You're not used to it." "Not used to it? You must have borrowed it from someone. Showing off by flashing the card, but later you'll have to pay back the person who lent you that card, right? I can imagine you're scared to splash the cash in such a place. It's all part of your act." Ah, funny thing to say. Who would lend their card, I wonder? "No matter how naive someone is, they wouldn't lend their card," Jim said. "How would you know that, Jim? You shouldn't say such insulting things," I said. "What's insulting? I'm just stating the truth. There's no way you could be wealthy if you married a poor woman like her," he retorted. "My wife is poor, you say?" my husband asked. "Yes, that's right. Her folks' place is a run-down one-floor home. You know that, right? Or maybe you were too embarrassed to visit her home, so you went to a family restaurant instead. Meeting her parents at a family restaurant for a marriage proposal is unheard of, but for poor people like you, it's probably the norm. Family restaurant, huh? The fact that you thought of that means you must have done your greeting there, right? If you hadn't experienced it yourself, you wouldn't have thought of it," my husband said, mocking him. "What are you talking about? I'm not short on money. I wouldn't do such a miserly thing," Jim protested. "Yet you came up with it." "I never would have thought of that, right, Sandra?" my husband asked me. "Well, I think I'd like to go to a family restaurant occasionally, but we rarely get the chance," I replied. "Exactly. What, you're lying? When you were with me, you were happy to go to family restaurants. That's because I had never really been to one before, I said. Oh, I bet you. Sure talk big. Coming to such a fancy restaurant just makes you want to act all important. Maybe that's you. It seems like you don't fit in this kind of place. What? You seem out of place, don't you think? Jim said. There's no way I'm out of place. You're the one who doesn't fit in here. Do you even know who I am? My husband asked. Why would I know you? If you want me to remember you, just become famous, Jim retorted. I am well known though, my husband said. Well, it's impossible for a regular employee like you to know me, I guess. What? A manager, not a regular employee, my husband said. Manager? Yes, how about that? Impressive, isn't it? Jim said sarcastically. At that moment, the chauffeur arrived, greeted politely, and informed my husband, Sir, your car is ready. Thank you, my husband replied. How, what's going on? Oh, well, you're probably just the president of some small company, Jim said. I work for the Holmes Group and I'm a manager there, my husband said. Oh, you're still just a manager? Excuse me, you consider yourself top tier, but staying as a manager at your age won't bring any advancement, Jim said. What? This man works at our company. Yes, he's been with our company for a long time, I said. What do you mean our company? You talk big, but you're just an office lady from a small company, Jim said. That's right. I don't have kids or any reason to quit my job, I said. But so you can't have kids? I was right. You can't have kids. Something's wrong with you, Jim said. Hey, there's a line to how rude you can be. Sandra is perfectly fine. If she's fine, why can't she get pregnant? Women are supposed to have kids. I don't need to explain that to you, my husband said. You can't say it because it would prove there's something wrong with her. This man is hopeless. Yes, so bad it's beyond saving. This man's name is Jim Stone, I said. Yes, I understand. He's fired, my husband said. Sandra, please contact HR, my husband said. Hey, what are you saying? Trying to shock me with that? What company's president are you thinking? You can fool me with such an obvious act? Are you stupid? Jim asked. Jim, my husband is the president of the Holmes Group, I said. What? That can't be, Jim said. However, the driver, with a look of pity, nodded as he looked at Jim. What? Seriously? Is he really our president? Jim asked. Yes, and I am his wife and the vice president of our company, I said. What? That's ridiculous. How could Sandra, from a poor family, end up as vice president with just a high school diploma? Jim exclaimed. Such things don't matter. Whether someone graduated from high school or college doesn't determine their worth, my husband said. That's ridiculous. I will never forgive anyone who insults my wife, my husband said. There's a union. Yes, there is a union. The union will protect us employees, Jim said. You're a manager, right? Managers are not union members, so you are not protected by the union. Didn't you know that? My husband asked. Seriously? Well, you better brace yourself. Since you insulted my wife, you must face the consequences, my husband said. Oh no. Jim had a stunned look on his face, but my husband didn't care and asked me if we should go. Then we left the table. That night, perhaps bothered by the afternoon's events, Jim called. His attitude was completely different from his arrogance earlier. Sandra, it's been a while, he said. What do you mean? We already had a talk this afternoon, Jim, I replied. Yes. What can I do for you? Your dismissal hasn't been issued yet, he said. You guys were just joking, right? What do you mean about you being the vice president and your husband being the president? He asked. No, they're all true. I'm surprised you don't know who your own company's president and vice president are, I replied. Why would you be the vice president, though? He asked. Because the best way I can help my husband is from the vice president's position, I said. No, but it's strange. Why would a high school graduate be the vice president? He said. It's not strange at all. I only graduated high school because I wanted to start working early, but after we separated, I acquired a college degree, I explained. Huh, really? He said. Yes. There are schools you can do from home, I said. So you really are the president's wife? He asked. Yes, I replied. How did you manage to marry the president? When did you get married? He asked. We got married after I divorced you. I met the president soon after, and we dated for about 2 years before getting married, I said. Married? Why would the president take an interest in someone like you? He asked. Stop being so rude. Oh, sorry. Connections are mysterious, aren't they? I just happened to meet the president, I said. Even so, why would he marry someone broke like you? Is he a philanthropist? He asked. No one marries for charity, I said. If he's not a philanthropist, did he marry you to make you his slave? It's odd otherwise. Maybe today you got lucky to be taken to a fancy restaurant, but usually you must be having plain, poor meals, right? And living a difficult life where you can't even buy what you like. Am I right? He asked. Why would you think that? That's not true at all. You're the only one who would do such a thing, I replied. There's no way you could marry such a rich man, he said. Why do you think so? Rich people have connections with politicians and other wealthy people. If a poorly raised woman like you shows up at their parties, it would embarrass the president, or maybe he lets his mistress attend those instead, he said. You're making wild assumptions. If you keep looking down on me like this, you'll truly regret it, I said. I'm just concerned for you. A woman with a poor upbringing like you marrying a rich man like the president will only suffer. A regular employee's husband would suit you better. Marrying someone richer than me, you must be a foolish woman who can't see ahead, he said. Who's the fool here? If you call. Just to say that, I'm hanging up, I said. No, wait. I'm not trying to look down on you. It's just true that you come from poverty. That can't be helped. Thinking I'm looking down on you for that is completely wrong, he said. You say I come from a poor family, but my father is wealthy. Your family is poorer than mine. I didn't say it back then because of your pride, I said. Your family home isn't even half the size of mine. Your father is just a department head and you're still just a manager, he said. That's not true. When I proposed to you, you were living in a small single-story house, I said. That was because we were renovating our home. Then we had stored all our belongings elsewhere. It was just a temporary residence. No need to move to a big house. My mother said that, he said. Can't be true. You don't have to believe it, but since the renovation is finished, even if you say you want to visit my parents at home, you've stubbornly refused to go again, I said. I couldn't tell you the truth. Who would visit such a poor rundown house? You really are hopeless, he said. Then I'll send you a picture. This is my family home. You'll see from the picture, I said. The photo I sent was of a large mansion. That's my house. I lived there for a while after our divorce, I said. What? That can't be true, he said. It's true. If this is true, then why were you working as an office lady in a small company? If you're so rich, you wouldn't need to work, and if you did work, wouldn't it be at a large corporation? He asked. Indeed, my father is the president of a major company. That company was a new one. He started when it was time to decide who would be the president. It was decided that my brother would take the role, so I volunteered to handle the administrative work. Now that company has advanced to the top of the industry, I explained. Is that true? Were you really so rich? He asked. Yes, this is the truth. This is the real me that you used to look down on, I said. So that's why you could marry the president, he said. That's not. I met the president because we shared the same hobbies. We met through our hobbies and hit it off. He didn't know I was the daughter of a wealthy family, and I didn't know he was the president, I explained. So you are at the company where I work because of that? How long have you been at that company? He asked. I joined the company right after our divorce. I had a connection by chance, I said. Why? When you were with me, you were a clerk at your brother's company, and after we divorced, you changed jobs, he said. That's right. My brother's company has grown so much, and he told me it was time to do what I love, so I thought I might as well pursue what I've always wanted to do. Then, just as a senior position became vacant, they headhunted me. But at that stage, I still had no acquaintance with the president. He was still someone high above, I said. I don't understand. How can you have connections like that? So rich people just connect with other rich people, he said. That's why I'm saying those things don't matter. Why do you think like that? It's because of that mindset that you're still just a manager, I said. I wonder why your wife hasn't gotten tired of you yet, he said. She can't get tired of me. I'm supporting her, I said. Keep it up with that attitude and you'll get what's coming to you. Anyway, that's the situation, so stop belittling me already, I said. I wasn't trying to belittle you. I really thought you were poor, he said. About that dismissal you mentioned this afternoon. I said, oh yes, your dismissal. After all the mocking you did, it's only natural you'd be dismissed. That would make me in a tough spot. Can you talk to the president so I don't get fired? He pleaded. What? You were just mocking me tremendously and yet you asked not to be dismissed? That's impossible. You know I have nothing but resentment towards you, I replied. Why? The fact that you don't think you're resented is truly astonishing, he said. What have I done to you? There's too much to even remember. It's that much. I bet your wife thinks the same as me. Why don't you ask her what she really thinks, though? I doubt she'll tell you. I only said those things because I thought you were poor, he said. Why do you think I'm mocking you when I'm just being honest? Once words are spoken, they can't be taken back. You know, you should understand that as an adult, I said. I do understand that. Then you should understand why you're being dismissed, right? I said. No, I don't understand at all. Please, I'll be in trouble if I'm dismissed, he said. If it were just about this afternoon, the president might have overlooked it, but then you had to call and ask why this and why that. My husband is here now, frowning. He really thinks you're hopeless. Maybe you should just give up. There's no saving you, I said. No, if the president is right there, why can't you just say so? It's only natural for a husband and wife to be together. Besides, you didn't ask if someone was with me, did you? He said. That's true, but you've poured gasoline on your own fire. You mocked not just me but my parents and my husband too, I said. Look, I didn't think you'd get this angry. Please, forgive me. If I had known you were a wealthy lady, I wouldn't have said such mocking things. I won't say them again. Please forgive me, he pleaded. Just give up. I think your dismissal order will come down tomorrow, I said, hanging up. The next day, Jim came to the president's office. His face was all white with dark circles under his eyes, and he seemed to be in a really bad condition. I was in a meeting with my husband, the president, about business matters, but I was startled by Jim's appearance. Jim, what's wrong? My husband asked. I'm very sorry, Jim apologized, sitting down. Jim, what are you doing? Please, just don't fire me, Jim pleaded. What do you mean? Of course, the president knew about yesterday's conversation. He had guessed from my responses during the call, and I had detailed Jim's remarks after hanging up. Therefore, his impression of Jim was very poor and his anger was greater than mine, I said. I am truly sorry again. I didn't know your wife was from a wealthy family. I think she is a perfect match for the president's wife. I also heard she graduated from university, even if it was through correspondence. She's a hard worker, a far cry from my own wife, Jim said. So you decided on her as your wife and then you got rid of her, right? My husband asked. Jim looked up at the president, wondering how he knew such a thing. Of course, I've told my husband everything. We're married after all. Or do you and your wife not talk about your pasts? I said, no, it's not like that, but that was a long time ago. I was young then. I thought Sandra was just a poor man's daughter, so I thought it was okay to have a mistress, Jim said. How does it come to that? Is that why you think it's okay to commit sexual harassment or power harassment? My husband asked. What do you mean? Don't tell me you haven't done it. There are complaints from your female coworkers. They say if our company doesn't handle it, they'll go to the police. Our company was just discussing what to do about it when your disrespectful remarks came yesterday. It's really hopeless, isn't it? My husband said. That's right. I wouldn't have thought you were actually harassing or bullying, but watching you yesterday, it seemed all too true. You don't even regard women as people, do you? You think they're below you, my husband said. No, I never. Even if that were true, firing me would be too harsh. Please show some mercy. Well, indeed you have a family. If you were fired, you wouldn't be the only one in trouble, Jim said. That's right, my husband said, smirking and looking at me. So what do you think, Sandra? How about sending Jim to our Ohio branch? My husband asked. Wait, what? The Ohio branch is in a region with very few people, practically unsustainable as a company. The former president who came from that town established the branch there to help the local people, but it's a lonely place with just one employee. The previous employee reportedly went mad from the loneliness. We want you to turn that branch around in 3 years. If you can do that, we'll bring you back here. Of course, if you can't, you'll spend your retirement in Ohio, my husband said. Thank you. I appreciate it, Jim said. Under the guise of the president's mercy, Jim set off for the Ohio branch, but both myself and my husband knew it was an impossible task. Having to work tirelessly alone for the small number of town residents, it was obvious that there wouldn't be any profit to be made. Unaware of this, Jim moved to the branch, all motivated. His transfer was with his mistress, who had been his wife, but surely she wouldn't be satisfied with just the cold and nothing else there. And eventually she reached her limit. His salary plummeted, and despite being the branch manager in name, his pay was minimal, leading his wife to start yelling. This resulted in daily arguments, and although he boasted that if he turned things around in 3 years, he could return to the head office, his city-bred wife couldn't believe his words. She left the divorce papers and went back to the city. Jim tried his best for a year, but no matter how hard he worked, the population wouldn't increase and no profits would come. Eventually, he realized that no amount of effort here would change anything, and one day submitted his resignation. After leaving the company on his own terms, Jim contacted his wife, but by then she had found someone new. Jim was not only ignored by her but was beaten up by her new man and ended up in the hospital. After being discharged, Jim looked for a job, but at his age he found nothing and life became harder for him. He lived in a shabby, run-down apartment, and the only job he could find was as a nighttime store clerk. The man who had once boasted of graduating from a prestigious university now stood alone in a store at night. As for me, I continued to be protected by my kind husband, enjoying another wonderful date this month. Marrying him changed my life so much. I'm grateful that Jim and I divorced.